You ever seen a man die slowly while smiling? He's the one holding the grocery bags, fixing the Wi-Fi, nodding his head during arguments, sitting across from a woman who used to moan his name like a prayer and now barely whispers his existence. He doesn't even know he's dying. He thinks he's being mature, patient, the man she asked him to be. But what he doesn't see is this: he's not evolving, he's disappearing. One apology at a time. One "it's okay" at a time. One fake smile at a time. And the cruelest twist? He signed up for it. Voluntarily. Now let me ask something most men never say out loud. Why do women often seem to run from the very things they say they want? They beg for sensitivity, then chase the guy who treats them like a networking call. They preach equality and then swoon for a man who takes charge. They say, "I want a nice guy," but ghost him the second he listens too well. Schopenhauer called it a biological paradox. But I call it something deeper. I call it a crucifixion because men are being nailed to expectations that were never real to begin with. And here's the punch to the gut: she's not lying. She's not a manipulator. She's not evil. She just doesn't know what she truly wants. Because what she says comes from her mouth, trained by culture. But what she responds to, that comes from her womb, wired by nature. And nature doesn't have a conscience. It doesn't care how many good morning texts you sent. It doesn't care that you stayed up late with her when her dog died. It doesn't care that you shelved your dream to help her chase hers. Nature doesn't reward the man who submits. It rewards the man who survives. You think love is going to override 3 million years of instinct? You think flowers, loyalty, and emotional openness are going to make her nervous system feel what her biology won't allow? Let me tell you something that'll either set you free or crush you, depending on how tightly you grip the illusion. She doesn't want your love. She wants your gravity. She wants to feel pulled. Like she's falling into something she can't predict, can't control, but craves. If you become too predictable, too soft, too available, always catering, always explaining, always fixing, she won't hate you. She'll just dry up. Schopenhauer didn't sugarcoat it. He wrote, "With women, love remains a matter of the will of nature, not of personal feeling." And if that line doesn't shatter your romantic delusion, I don't know what will. Nature doesn't eliminate weak men with war anymore. It uses indifference, disinterest, emotional starvation. She doesn't have to leave you. She just has to stop laughing at your jokes. Stop lighting up when you walk in. Stop needing your touch. And because you've been told it's always your fault, you'll try harder. You'll love more. Be more romantic. More agreeable. More soft. You'll walk straight into the slaughter, dressed in sincerity, because no one taught you the truth. The more you act like the man she said she wanted, the less you become the man her instincts can actually respect. Let that sink in. Her words? Social programming? Her actions? Prehistoric wiring. What she says is a script. What she wants is ancient, raw, unforgiving. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't read poetry. It doesn't care about your intentions. It smells power, direction, leadership. You think you're the good guy in her life? Think again. If you've ever been dumped after giving her everything, here's the real diagnosis: you gave too much and became nothing. You stopped being the mountain and turned into the mud. That look she gave you in the beginning? Like you were a god? Remember that? Not just attractive. Not just desirable. Sacred. Her eyes lit up like she had discovered gravity had a name. And it was yours. That wasn't fake. That wasn't imagined. That was her body recognizing power. But then it faded. That sparkle disappeared, replaced by a tired politeness. A forced smile. The kind of vibe you get when someone's trying to convince themselves that they still feel it. But they don't. And neither of you can admit it. Because the man she worshipped wasn't the one trying to keep her. It was the one who didn't need her. Who had purpose. Boundaries. A mission. It was the man who stood on his own 2 feet even before she ever walked into his life. Schopenhauer said a man can only be himself so long as he is alone. And if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom. And that's terrifying. Because most men today? They're not free. Not even close. Their emotions are leased out to a woman who claims to love them but has long since stopped respecting them. And when that respect fades, your castle turns into a daycare. You go from king to caretaker. She'll say you've changed. But the truth is you softened. And nature? Nature doesn't reward softness without strength. So let me speak to the bones in your body. You cannot negotiate attraction. You cannot beg your way into desire. You cannot whimper your way back onto the throne you once sat on like it was yours by birthright. The game isn't broken. It's just never been explained to you. You were taught to take her words literally, to treat her preferences like contracts. I want a man who communicates. So you talk more. I want vulnerability. So you pour out your soul like a poem. But that's not what she meant. What she meant was, I want a man who speaks with presence. I want a man whose vulnerability is powerful, not needy. A man who has tamed his chaos and offers it like fire to the cold. She's not lying. She just doesn't speak your language. And Schopenhauer? He saw all of this before therapists on TikTok started selling high-value man guides. He didn't write fairy tales. He wrote autopsies. Schopenhauer said it plainly. In their hearts, women believe they were created not for the sake of man himself, but for the propagation of the species. You know what that means? It means she's not here to understand you. She's here to select you. She's not listening to your feelings. She's feeling your energy. And energy, my brother, doesn't ask for permission. It pulls. Or it doesn't. You're not competing with other men. You're competing with presence. With the gravity of calm. With the power of silence. With the force of a man who doesn't need her love to feel whole. And if that sounds harsh, good. Because it's time to stop trying to be lovable and start becoming undeniable. You weren't born to be a boyfriend. You were born to be a man. And manhood isn't a performance. It's not a brand. It's not something you learn on YouTube. It's a way of being. It's standing so rooted in your truth that when a woman leans into you, she forgets what day it is. But most men today, they're not being. They're performing. Smiling through pain. Nodding through disrespect, apologizing for their masculinity. And every time you do it, she loses a little more respect, not because you're weak, but because you betrayed your own design to make her comfortable. And here's the brutal irony. She doesn't want what she says. She wants what she can admire. And admiration doesn't come from convenience. It comes from your edge. That edge, that presence, it starts with loyalty to yourself, not to her moods. Not to her expectations, to your mission. That's what Schopenhauer was trying to whisper to us through the centuries. And that, my brother, is the beginning of male enlightenment. Not blaming her, not blaming yourself, but rising above both. Let me let you in on a truth that no man ever tells his son. But every man eventually learns the hard way. She doesn't fall for your effort. She falls for your energy. Effort is transactional. Energy is spiritual. You can buy her flowers, write her poems, hold her when she cries, but none of it will matter if your energy is starving. If your masculine core is weak, everything you give will start to rot in her hands. That's why the nice guy always loses. That's why the man who chases ends up blocked. And the one who walks away, she can't stop thinking about him. It's not a mystery. It's not because women are broken. It's emotional gravity. But no one taught you that. You were told to be a good man. They said if you just love her hard enough, deep enough, selflessly enough, she'll love you back. They told you if you show how loyal, safe, and available you are, she'll see your heart and say, finally, a real man. But Schopenhauer, he knew better, and so do I, because I've been there. I've loved with everything I had, and I've watched it fall apart. Not because I wasn't enough, but because I gave too much without asking if it was received. Like pouring wine into a cracked glass. No matter how much you give, if the container is broken or worse, not meant to hold what you are, it'll never be enough. You think she left because you weren't good enough? Nah, she left because she felt too safe. And safe without strength? That becomes boring. Quickly. She didn't want to leave. Her biology forced her to. Have you ever seen a woman fall head over heels for a man who doesn't even seem to try? You call him toxic. You call her delusional. But what you're witnessing is nature following its script. Because for her body, not her brain, love isn't about kindness charts. It's about voltage. A pull. A surge. A deep magnetic charge. And Schopenhauer? He nailed it. The sexual impulse is the most complete manifestation of the will to live. This will he speaks of is not rational. It doesn't care if you're emotionally healthy or spiritually healed. It wants vitality, power, force. Not force that dominates, but force that directs. Not control, but certainty. That's why she says one thing and does another. That's why she shares quotes about vulnerability and emotional intelligence. And then dates the man who hasn't replied in days. And you? You sit there, jaw clenched, heart racing, wondering where you went wrong. Here's the truth: you didn't do too little. You became too available, too predictable, too explainable. And once she can map out your next move like a GPS route, she loses interest. Because when there's no mystery, there's no tension, no seduction, no pull. And when you're no longer a man she feels pulled toward, you become her emotional employee. Let that hit hard. You were taught wrong. Society told you comfort equals connection, that safety builds desire. But in the world of feminine attraction, mystery always outranks comfort. That's why Schopenhauer wrote, "Women are instinctively cunning and know that to control a man they must not always say what they mean, nor mean what they say." It's not deception. It's nature's language. And if you don't learn to speak that language, emotional tension, charged silence, grounded presence, you'll misinterpret every signal. You'll think her quiet is distance when it's really a test. You'll think her moods are instability when they're actually the ocean asking, "Can your ship handle this?" You'll hear her say, "I'm fine," and you'll believe it. But the man who's rooted, he doesn't need words. He feels it. He knows. Because he's learned to be the storm and the stillness. Not a fixer, not a pleaser, not her therapist, but her flame. That's why she drifts when you stop leading. That's why she rewrites history, saying, "I don't know what happened. I just stopped feeling it." What she means is, you let me lead, and I don't want to lead. I want to surrender, but only to a man who knows exactly where he's going. Schopenhauer warned us again. A man who is not master of himself is not fit to be master of anything, least of all a woman's heart. Here's the part that's hard to swallow. The world isn't going to teach you how to be a man. It'll teach you how to be safe, how to be nice, how to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. But safety, that's sterile. And sterile doesn't stir a woman's soul. Women don't crave sterile. They crave depth, mystery, fire. Not because they're irrational, but because they're emotional. Because they were shaped by evolution to test your strength, not to destroy you, but to discover who you really are when things fall apart. And here's the truth. You can't fake it. You can't podcast your way into it. You can't pick up line your way into manhood. You either become that man, or you keep losing to the version of yourself that never outgrew boyhood. Because here's what every woman feels, even if she doesn't say it. She'll never stay with a man who bends to win her, because deep down she doesn't want to be the prize. She wants to belong to a man who already knows he's won. And if you're still listening, I believe you're ready. Ready to stop seeking validation from women who haven't even validated themselves. Ready to walk away from the tables where you've had to beg for the love you were born to inspire. Ready to become the kind of man whose presence speaks louder than his words. The kind of man whose energy doesn't ask for attention. It demands it silently. And here's the secret. Once you stop chasing signals from her, you won't need them. You'll have become your own compass. And nothing is more attractive than a man who no longer needs a map to find himself. So, if you've been left, overlooked, ghosted, betrayed, it's not the end. It's your initiation. The heartbreak wasn't a punishment. It was a baptism, a cleansing of the parts of you that were never meant to lead. You don't rise by resenting her. You rise by understanding her nature and mastering yours. Let Schopenhauer be your witness. Let your pain be your curriculum. Let your solitude be your sanctuary, not your sentence. Because in that silence, something sacred happens. You remember, you were never born to beg. You were born to build. And her? She will either rise to meet you there, or vanish while trying to test you. Either way, you win. Because your worth was never up for debate. Let me hit you with one final truth. The kind that doesn't just sting. It reshapes your soul. You were sold a lie. A beautiful, dangerous lie. That if you just loved her harder, if you texted her more, if you showed how much you care, how much you'd sacrifice, she'd finally see you, finally choose you, finally love you. But love, true love, is not a reward. It's not a salary for suffering. It's not a medal for devotion. It's a reflection of your energy. of your clarity, of your unapologetic masculinity. She doesn't want to feel like your mission. She wants to feel like your witness, watching you build, watching you rise, not because you need her, but because you've already claimed yourself. That's when her biology responds. That's when her eyes light up. That's when her feminine self softens. Not to the man who loves her the most, but to the man who loves himself enough not to collapse for her. That's why she's drawn to the one who doesn't chase. That's why she can't stop thinking about the man who doesn't explain himself. Because in his stillness she feels safe. And in his edge, she feels alive. And maybe now, you stop over-explaining. Stop over-apologizing. Stop overcompensating. Because the mountain doesn't chase the weather. It just stands. And everything else orbits around it. You don't need to win her back. You need to win yourself back. You don't need to prove you're a good guy. You need to remember you're a powerful man. You don't need a new technique. You need a new standard. One that starts with this sentence. I would rather be alone than be unseen. That's the line. That's the ritual. That's the rebirth. And it has nothing to do with her. Because when you reclaim your edge, your purpose, your gravity, she will feel it before you ever say a word. And maybe, just maybe, she starts leaning in again. But this time, you're not the one bending. You're not her emotional crutch. You're her clarity. You're not explaining yourself, you're embodying your standard. And maybe, she wants answers now. Maybe she starts texting. Maybe she starts chasing. But now you're not doing it for her. You're doing it for your kingdom. Because here's what Schopenhauer saw before the modern world tried to sugarcoat it. Women exist, in the main, solely for the propagation of the species, and are only the means thereto. That doesn't mean she's shallow. It doesn't mean she's cruel. It means biology is louder than intention. She may tell you she wants stability, but she'll follow the man who lives in chaos, if his soul is sharp enough to guide her through it. She may tell you she wants a provider, but what her body responds to is the man who provides direction, not dependence. She's torn between her cultural script and her primal wiring. And if you don't know that, you become collateral. So here's the final punchline. She's not confused. You are. Because you believed her instructions, instead of reading her energy. You thought emotional availability meant tears and open wounds. But what she actually needed was emotional leadership. A man who could feel deeply but not drown. A man who could hold space but never collapse into it. She doesn't want a therapist. She wants a flame. And when you lose that fire, she doesn't yell. She doesn't cry. She gets quiet. And in that quiet, most men unravel. But not you. Not anymore. Because you've remembered who you are. Not a servant. Not a beggar. Not an echo. But a mountain. A man. A leader. Now rise. And sit back on your throne.